Hey everyone, Scooter with Scooter's Brass. Welcome you to the show, Shooting the Brass, because shooting the shit doesn't seem to go over real well. Funny how that works. Um, my guest for today has not arrived yet. She's got some stuff going on in the background that she's got to take care of, so she's going to be a few minutes late. So while we're waiting on her to show up, I'd like to talk a little bit about training. Now, yesterday, Mrs. Scooter and I went and we participated in a CCW class um, put on by Seven Tactical. You can find them on Facebook, CEVEN Tactical.com, I think is the link. And we basically are working on getting our CCW because we haven't had a CCW since, I don't know, like 2000, 2001, something like that. So, here we are. It was a really good class, and I actually learned a few things. We had a CCW. We used to have our CCW back in. We got it in like 2000. Of course, it's lapsed since then because Arizona is now a constitutional carry state, so we don't have to have a permit to carry open and or concealed in Arizona. But having a concealed carry permit actually opens up a few things that you don't have as a non-CCW holder. For example, with a CCW in Arizona, if I go to buy a gun, that is my federal background check. Okay, because my fingerprints are on record with the FBI, all of that, I can go in. Instead of having them have to contact the NICS system to get approval for me to get a firearm, I give them my card. I say, here is my CCW. They take the information and it's done. It cuts out the lag from having the FFL call NICS or get on the website for NICS and running a background check. So it's kind of handy. It also allows me to carry in places that some people can't. For example, if I go to a restaurant that serves alcohol, with a CCW, I'm allowed to carry concealed as long as I can't drink while I'm there. And if it's posted that I can't carry, then I can't carry, of course. But yeah, that's the way it is. Also, it lets you carry within 1,000 feet of a school as long as you're not on the school property. You can be on the grounds, which is that 1,000-yard circle around the school, but you can't actually carry on the property of the school. It's kind of configures. So we went through our class yesterday, and it was a very interesting class. It was very well put on. It was only 2 hours because we are not in Arizona required to actually do the practical skills test where you actually have to qualify with a firearm. So that's pretty good. Well, we have people in the chat room today. That's nice. Hello, everybody in the chat room. Welcome to the show. I would recommend, because I'm a big proponent of training. That's one of the reasons why I compete, is because every month I train. It's only a day a month, but the things that I'm actually training on in that 1 day per month is safety, how to unload my weapons safely without risk to myself or others. I also learn target acquisition, moving through a stage that has multiple targets that you have to engage with multiple weapons, loading and reloading on the run, targeting on the run, and not shooting myself, which is always a big one. And that's what I recommend for other people. Train as much as you can. I understand that ammo is scarce, but ammo is starting to come back now. We were at the AJI Sporting Goods yesterday, and they had quite a bit of ammo on the shelf for all different types of types, 38 special, 45, etc. We haven't been seeing that kind of ammo available in a long time because usually as soon as it gets there, it gets bought up. And so that kind of cuts it through. Now, what else was I going to talk about? I'm kind of at a loss here because I was hoping that Merissa would be here earlier, but I understand she's busy and she's got stuff to do. So one of the things that I've been seeing in the media I guess they had what's considered a mass shooting over the weekend. Um, we seem to have a lot of these. And of course, that automatically springs up the gun debate of, oh, well, we need to have common sense gun legislation. And it's really funny because whenever these people are talking about common sense gun legislation, they never actually talk to gun owners. They just come up with their own ideas, not being gun owners themselves. They don't exactly know exactly what they should be, what common sense gun laws are, or what common sense legislation is. Because they don't know the capabilities of the different firearms. For example, you got people that think that an AR-15 is an assault rifle, but it's not. It's a sporting rifle. It does the same thing as a bolt-action 223 or 308, depending on your version. You just don't have. I mean, with a 223 bolt-action rifle, you still have a magazine. It's just that you have to manually load it. It's not going to change that much. So, with the way things have been going lately in the national stage and the state stage, different states overall, it's really easy to get confused and not understand the different perspectives of what should happen when we're talking about common sense gun legislation. They always throw out universal background checks. So here's the thing about universal background checks. It's great. Here in Arizona, if you don't have a CCW, anytime you buy a firearm from an FFL, you go through a background check. Whether it's at a gun show, whether it's at a store, any of that kind of stuff, because the federal laws are pretty adamant about how you have to report that kind of stuff. Now, where it gets gray and where I have a problem with the universal background checks is private sales. Private citizens that don't have an FFL do not have access to the NICS system. So how am I, if I want to sell a gun, supposed to be able to do a background check on a person I want to sell it to? That complicates it. At this point in time, I would actually have to, if universal background checks were required, I had to do a background check on somebody I wanted to sell a gun to. I would have to go to an FFL because I'm not one myself. I would have to sell the gun, sell it to them. I would have to sell it to the gun store. Then the gun store would have to sell it then and do a background check to the person that I'm trying to transfer it to. This is going to cause a whole bunch of problems because once I sell that firearm to the FFL, they can change the price. And then the person that wants to buy it says no. Now the FFL owns the firearm and they can sell it however they please. It causes problems. From a standpoint of private sales, if I don't have access to the NICS system, I can't do a background check. Plain and simple. So it's real simple. You have to open up the NICS system to anyone that wants to be able to do a background check. So that leads to possible abuse. Okay. So you have people that are randomly doing background checks on people, even if they're not trying to sell a firearm. All they need is a social security number and a name. Boom, they can start doing background checks on people and invading their privacy. I have a problem with that. I don't want my privacy invaded. I kind of like my privacy. And, that's one of those things. It's just me. So you have to be careful when you start talking about what they consider common sense gun legislation. Okay, you can try to do an assault weapon ban. Assault weapon is, by definition, any weapon used to assault someone. So that pretty much bans all firearms that's used in an assault. Okay, well, I've been a gun owner for probably 35 years. I've never assaulted anyone with a gun. I've never pointed my gun at somebody. I've never brandished it. I've never done any of that kind of thing. So you want to make legislation to make it harder for me as a legal gun owner to be able to do my job or to be a citizen, which is not going to affect criminals. So we have a problem with that. Okay, it looks like Marissa's here. This is the first time I've had somebody on the show with me, so I'm going to try to do this without screwing it up. Hopefully it works. Let me see if I can bring her in. I'm going to try to add her to the stream. See if we can get this done. I'm working on it. Can you hear me, Merissa?
I can.
Yay, it worked. This is the first time I've had somebody on the show with me. I'm really happy that you're here. I was just talking about common sense gun legislation and how it doesn't work because criminals don't follow the law.
Correct.
So Merissa and I have been friends for quite a long time. We've actually only met in person once, and that was 2 years ago at the Second Amendment celebration at the Capitol here in Arizona. But we've been online friends for a long time. She's a conservative. I'm a liberal. But we have common ground. And that common ground is the Constitution and our Second Amendment rights. Now, Merissa, when you were at the event in 2020, you were one of the speakers. And you talked about your own situation and why it's important for you to be able to have the ability and freedom to own your firearms to protect yourself.
Yes, absolutely. I'm a survivor of domestic violence, and usually at least a few times a year, my former abuser tries to contact me, and if I am not able to have my Second Amendment right, my life is at threat, and I will not survive.
And that's one of the things too, because when you're talking about your speech, you specifically talked about the domestic violence issue, which is very important, especially for people who are victims,
Yes.
to be able to protect themselves. And that's another reason why the Second Amendment is such an important thing for citizens.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's many arguments on the conservative and the Republican side about defending against bad government. But the reality is that we have an epidemic of violence happening in Phoenix right now. Last year, I ran for Phoenix mayor, and I tracked our violent stats and how the lockdowns were impacting that. And we had a dramatic increase in domestic violence deaths, 180% increase. And we are not seeing that slow down. I'm sorry, my cat's going to join the broadcast in a moment.
That's okay, because my dogs are probably going to show up too. So
we also, we've seen a 44% increase in homicides. And so all of this has to do with the ability to be able to defend yourself. And there's also no guarantee if you are a concealed carry holder, if that means that you're going to be able to defend yourself, but you at least have a fighting chance. You at least are not put into a corner where you have no options. It was just, about 3 months ago now that I was having a meeting in the evening, dinner time. And when I left the restaurant, someone that was experiencing homelessness cornered us and threatened to shoot us if we didn't give them a cigarette. And so it's not just important to, learn how to use a gun and carry a gun, but you also need to have that training for de-escalation to properly protect yourself. And we were able to de-escalate that situation, but if you aren't prepared to handle that ahead of time, then you may panic in a situation like what we saw our congressman do when he was faced at a Thai restaurant and someone came at him with a hatchet. He just threw his wallet at them and ran into the restaurant. That's not a scenario that helps anyone. We need to be able to have the skills to be able to de-escalate and disarm people.
And that's one of the things I think we talked about last week on the show was situational and environmental awareness. And I've talked a lot about training because training is very important. If you're the type of person that owns a gun and you go to the gun range once a month, you're not going to learn a whole lot.
Right.
Which is one of the reasons why I started doing competition shooting, is because I was able to learn gun safety, transitioning, multiple target acquisition, all that kind of stuff, because that kind of stuff will save you in the future if you do it enough, because it's muscle memory. And the sad thing is a lot of people go out and buy a gun, don't get the training, and expect themselves to be able to protect themselves and their loved ones, and it fails. And then it gives the whole Second Amendment a bad name because, well, this person had a gun and they died.
Right.
There's more to it. There's more to the responsibility of being a gun owner than just being able to own one.
Yeah, absolutely. You need to be able to practice regularly. There's many great organizations out there that have lots of training courses. One particular training course for me that I found was really helpful is there's a group of women called the Arizona Women's Association Shooting Association. And they go out to Ben Avery every couple of weeks and do practice through many different scenarios that you would experience in real life. And so, and what I appreciated about it is because I'm a woman, they are doing their training primarily from a female perspective, but there's lots of men that attend the courses also. And then you know how to deal with a variety of situations. If you're at the grocery store, if you're at your car, if you're at work, if you're in your home, how do you deal with a threat that happens that could happen to you? And if you aren't trained ahead of time, you might make some mistakes that end up being tragic.
Right, and that's one of the reasons why I'm a big proponent of training. And I've had a lot of liberal friends over the past couple of years that have come to me and asked for help in purchasing firearms. And one of the things that I've always stood for when helping them to pick out the right firearm and go through the process is to get training, because without the training, you're dangerous to yourself more than anybody else. And so I'm a big proponent of training, and that's why, my wife and I went through CCW training yesterday, which was really nice, because we haven't had our CCW in years, so we're going to get that renewed. But even locally, if you go to the different gun ranges, Ben Avery, I just did a match out there on July 4th. I do matches at Rio Salado. Any kind of matches that helps you hone the skills is important. Because you can watch Facebook videos all day long about how to shoot, but unless you actually shoot, you don't know what it's going to be like. You don't know how it's going to work. You don't know how you're going to react to the sound, the blast, how the gun's going to react. So for me, it's all about trying to get people to be responsible and get training so that they are responsible citizens and don't become a statistic.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's especially important for survivors of domestic violence. One of the things that the anti-gun community tries to throw into my face frequently is that, well, statistics show that women that carry guns are more likely to be killed by their guns, especially in domestic violence situations. And again, that comes down to your ability to have the training that you need. I would argue with those statistics because I think that they are manipulated quite a bit. But at the end of the day, I can tell you this: if I am facing my former abuser, or I'm facing the gentleman that was trying to attack me in the parking lot, without being able to carry my gun, or and in addition to other potential weapons, I am in a no-win position, and so I am at their mercy, and violence is able to happen to me at their will. In the position that I am able to carry self-defense options and be trained on how to handle that, I am in a position of power and control that the other person is not expecting they're going to face. And so typically violent people, they don't know how to deal with situations where someone can defend themselves. They're targeting you because they think that you are weak. They think that you are an easy target. They're not trying to give themselves extra work. Typically, they're just trying to be able to take out their violent aggression, or take advantage of someone, or be a bully. And so if you aren't protecting yourself, if you aren't doing all of those things that we have available in Arizona, we're fortunate that we're a Second Amendment state and that we have so many training opportunities. Then you're really giving them the upper hand for no reason at all. And I firmly believe that, although I'm a huge supporter of our police, and I believe that we need to have more law enforcement and more community officers, especially, at the end of the day, you are your own first responder. And the more that we increase ourselves as a community where we have a strong culture of self-defense, the less these violent people will think that they can take advantage of us and destroy our community. And so it's important that we move forward. Sorry, there's my cat. It's important that we come together as a community and stop looking at our Second Amendment as a partisan issue. It's really about protecting our community, keeping our community safe. And a big part of it comes down to even loving your neighbor and making sure that, you can protect yourself, your family, but also loved ones around you.
Right. And then in 2020, when you were actually speaking at the Second Amendment celebration at the Capitol, that's one of the things that you covered. And you don't see a lot of that these days when talking about the Second Amendment. Although in 2021, it was kind of nice to see some of the people at that rally, the Second Amendment rally, that were actually talking about busting down the divide and being inclusive of liberal and conservative gun owners as one group, as opposed to dividing it by political stand. And you talked about that in your speech about how we needed to bring both sides, Second Amendment people, together. And to me, that's a big thing. That's one of the things I've been trying to do for a long time, is to take the Second Amendment out of partisan politics and put it as an American value. And you were the first person I heard speak about that. And that was very impressive to me.
And this is something that I especially focused on when I ran for mayor. There's so many issues that impact our community. Public safety is one of them, that it should not be a partisan issue. And the more that we make it a partisan issue, the more we lose as a community and as citizens, because then it becomes a tit for tat. And people then will start island guarding their team. And I earlier this year, I formed an organization with some of the volunteers from my campaign. It's called easyaz.org. And we help people to stay informed on the issues. And Second Amendment is one of our top issues, because these should be nonpartisan issues. These are things that all of us care about, and all of us want to make sure that we can have safe neighborhoods. And especially as our number of patrol officers continue to dwindle, we need to find an alternative solution, and that's us.
Right. And that's one of the things we went over in our CCW class yesterday, was that the state police, county, city police, sheriff's offices and stuff, their duty is not to protect you. Their duty is to enforce the law. Right. The person that's originally supposed to protect you is you. You're supposed to be your first line of defense. And that's one of the things from my standpoint, because I've been a gun owner for 35 years or so. I know I'm old, but still, I take my personal security and my wife's personal security in our home and our friends as top notch. So I'm going to do whatever I have to do to protect them. And protecting them means that I train, I learn, I become proficient, and I understand when I shouldn't use excessive force. That doesn't make me a criminal. That makes me a person who cares about my own security, because I'm going to be the person that stops something in action before the police even get here, because they don't show up like that. There's a lag time. When you call 911, you could be 2 to 3 to 15 minutes out, depending on where you live and your situation. I'm not going to wait that long. Right. I'm going to protect myself and my family.
And the other thing to think about, when I was in this situation a couple of months ago where we had someone threatening us with a gun, he hadn't shown his gun. And when I called the police for help, it still took them 45 minutes to come and help me. Now I told them, to be fair, I told them on the call that I de-escalated the situation, but I didn't know how far away the guy was. He had just walked away, and I didn't know if he was coming back or what the scenario was. But they knew that he potentially had a gun and was threatening me with that, and it still took 45 minutes. And so people need to be aware that we are living in unprecedented times, and you should not rely on anyone else to protect yourself but you. And the Supreme Court has ruled a number of times and reiterated the fact that we have a Second Amendment. We do not have a right to the government protecting us. We have a right to only protecting ourselves.
Right. And that's one of the things that was very clear in how they were teaching the class yesterday, was that your first line of defense is yourself.
Hmm.
The government, police, fire, whatever, is not, their duty is not to protect you. Their duty is to enforce the law. And it made a lot of impact yesterday because I never really heard it put that way in a class or in discussion, but it makes sense because the police are I mean, I train, like, for example, I just finished recertifying my CPR first aid. So I'm a first responder because I understand that, for example, if something happens here in the house or something happens at work, I'm going to be able to deal with it faster than calling 911 and having them show up. It's the same with the Second Amendment. If somebody breaks into my house with harmful intent, I'm going to be able to deal with it faster and more efficiently than cops because this is my home.
Right.
I know my home. I know the rooms. I know the hallways. I know everything about it. I am the person that's most qualified to defend it. I don't look forward to the idea of doing that. I have no intention ever to pull a gun on anyone unless I absolutely have no other choice. But because of my training and my stance and all that, I am capable of doing so without hesitation because I've been trained and because I have the access and because I know what I'm doing. I feel sorry for people that assume that the government is going to come save them because we know that's not going to happen. It just doesn't. That's not the way it works.
Well, they're not even equipped to do that anymore. I mean, we are not in a scenario. For a while, I had on Easy a chart showing the number of police officers that we have versus population. And all over Arizona, it has decreased significantly over the last decade. So there is no city that is equipped to properly be able to respond and protect you. And that is just the facts. That is the situation that we are at. And so we must take on that personal responsibility to protect ourselves and our families. And one thing I do want to bring up is that while we still have threats against our Second Amendment at the federal level of government, one bill that we did pass this year is a bill that protects our Second Amendment in Arizona, and it makes the statement and order that we will not enforce laws, federal laws or federal orders that violate our state Second Amendment rights. And so I think that was a very important law that we passed. I was very happy to see that it was able to be passed and signed by the governor. And so while we have our Second Amendment, we should utilize it. You do not want to wait until you're in a scenario where a lot of regulations are coming down and you have to go through hoops and you're not able to be able to access your Second Amendment in a timely manner. And so we have a lot of our rights are protected in Arizona, but that's not enough. We need to make sure that we are exercising them and responsibly with training.
Right. And that was one thing too, even from myself being a liberal, I was very happy to see that law passed because I'm the type of person who doesn't believe that the Constitution is a partisan issue. And like all my TikTok posts and stuff, I've been responding to some of those folks all day long that keep telling me, oh, you sound like a conservative. You're definitely conservative. You're not a liberal. No, that's not it. Okay. Just because I believe in the Constitution doesn't make me a conservative or a liberal. It makes me an American.
Correct.
I believe in the Constitution because that's what made our laws. That's what made our country. I don't think that Democrat, Republican, conservative, liberal has any effect on that. And so I get a lot of flack, of course, because I'm a liberal that totes guns around. And, you can see the gun safe behind me. I'm a gun owner. I have been a gun owner for a long, long time because I understand the purpose of it, the responsibility of it, and the necessity of it. There's been a lot of, due to COVID, lately we've had, I guess there's been 360 mass shootings is what they're calling it here in the United States. And then, of course, they're going to blame the guns unless it doesn't fit their narrative. For example, San Jose wasn't a mass shooting with a long, scary AR-15 rifle. It was with a pistol. So you don't see that in the news anymore. I mean, it was a flash in the pan and boom, it was gone. For me, people need to understand, and I always ask people to come out to the range with me so I can take away the mystery and say, here, this is an AR-15, shoot it. Mm-hmm. Tell me how this is going to make any difference. I don't have a lot of people that take me up on that offer,
Yeah.
because it is what it is. But I still offer because I understand that it's something that we should try to do to protect our community. And
When
I go ahead.
sorry, Fred. No, when I was, I grew up in Connecticut. I would spend the summers here in Arizona, but I would see people carrying weapons openly because my grandparents lived up in Chino Valley in northern Arizona, and it's a very rural area, cowboy country. I absolutely adore it. But I didn't understand why we needed to have guns. In fact, I thought that we should have licenses, and it should be treated like a car, and you should have insurance and all of these things. I was considered to be actually pretty anti-gun when I first officially moved to Arizona. And it was through time that I was able to see that, there are a lot of responsible ways that you can be able to access your gun rights now. Look at my kitty cat here.
Hi, kitty.
And so I found that there's a lot of ways that you can responsibly practice it. And once I went and shot my first gun for the first time, I kind of had an exhilaration. I was super scared. I was panicked. My hands were shaking the whole time. But once I did that at the gun range with my friend, I said, "Oh my goodness, why don't we just have everyone that's anti-gun just go and do this? Go and get your basic training, go to a gun range with supervision, and just fire a gun just once. And then tell me if you think that it's still a situation where it should be banned." Because when you even know just the basic 4 elements of protecting yourself, that goes a long way to making sure that you are able to carry responsibly. But there's so much training out there. It's so easy to be able to access training. There's more training to be able to be a responsible gun owner than there is to be a responsible driver. And so all of the statements against that, it's just not living in reality. And my only regret is that from growing up in Connecticut, that I didn't grow up in an environment where I learned how to defend and protect myself.
Right. And I think a lot of people just don't understand that concept because, on one of those interesting stories, we took Mrs. Scooter's mom to the gun range once because my grandmother, she had a concealed carry permit, national concealed carry permit, and she carried a gun until she died. And we inherited the gun. And so we took Mrs. Scooter to the range with her mom, and we tried to teach her mom how to shoot. And her first shot, she took the lights out. This was over at Caswell's in Mesa. She shot the lights out in the pistol bay and put the gun down after one shot and said, "I'm never touching it again." Okay, that's fine. It scared the shit out of you, which is actually not a bad thing. But how a person reacts to that first incident is really important. I would never take her to the gun range again because I don't want to pay the damages to the range. But there's a lot of people, I think, specifically that are afraid of gun ownership because they don't have any experience with firearms.
Yeah.
And I've helped a lot of people over the past year or so get experience with firearms, and it's changed their opinion about whether or not they should be able to carry or non-carry. That's one of the reasons I left the Democratic Party is because they had that whole assault weapons ban they put into it. And I'm like, I don't have time for this shit. I'm a competitive shooter. I use an assault rifle once a month at a competition. So you're telling me that I've never used a gun in any kind of action where I was threatening anybody else, but you're going to try to ban my firearms because you're afraid of them?
Right. It's not.
Mass shootings are this much.
Yeah, you shouldn't be legislating out of fear. And the truth is that shootings that we see, they're really more of an outward display of someone that's having a severe emotional breakdown. It's a culmination of mental health issues that were not addressed because it is not normal. It is not sound. It is not practical. It is not a sound mental health position to go and want to hurt other people. And so when we're saying we're going to ban the guns, you're not actually addressing the root cause of what's causing these problems to happen. And you're actually in turn making the community less safe because you have people like yourself that are trained to handle these scenarios that you could de-escalate and protect, protect people in a public setting. And instead that is where the government is then declaring these places to basically be like a duck hunting zone where it's just a free for all, because they know that there have already been mitigations done to allow them to be violent at will. And instead of creating these locations that are easy targets, we should be keeping violent people guessing, and we should approach more of the issues that we have of how did these lockdowns impact our society? Why are we seeing more shootings happening, and how do we address that? Because if you take the guns away, they're just going to turn to another weapon, and that weapon is likely going to be more deadly and lethal and irresponsible than a gun. In the targets that it can face. We've seen around the world that there have been explosions that have occurred, and that the information to how to create these explosions are free on the internet. And so we're not in a scenario where violence goes away simply because you took away a weapon of choice. They will find another weapon. They're violent people. They need to have a display of violence to have themselves be controlled. It's almost as if violence is a drug to them.
Right. And that's one of the things that you don't see with any of the common sense gun legislation is focusing on the mental health issue that causes it. Right. They did a study, and I can't remember specifically who did it. I could look it up. It was on the LA Times. They studied every mass shooting from 1966 until 2018, I think. And one of the main things they found was that every single person that did this had some sort of mental health issue that was never addressed. And that's where we get mass shooting. And they also, if you watch the news and stuff, they never talk about the fact that 65% of gun-related violence is suicide.
Correct.
That's obviously a mental health issue. Nobody wants to focus on the suicide. Health issue. Right.
Yeah, our mass shootings are basically public suicides, and we don't address it as that. We should.
Right. It's basically they're trying to be suicide by cop, going out in a blaze of glory and suicide by cop. And nobody pays attention to that fact that from a mental health standpoint, we have a lot of people that need assistance, medical assistance, mental health assistance that don't get it. And when they snap, that's what happens. But it's still 0.002% of gun violence, mass shootings. Right. Your biggest percentage is suicides, and that's another issue.
We also don't, and the other thing is that we, when we're talking about a culture of self-defense, we have not created a culture of identifying any type of concerns or situations that you could find that there's a mental health issue that's brewing. And we also don't teach people how to be a good friend or a good neighbor to someone that's experiencing something like that and how to get help. And because of the fact that we are now weaponizing things, weaponizing mental health with things like red flag laws or red gun flag laws, what's happening is that then people are instead trying to hide the challenges that they're going through because they don't want to be put on some list and have Big Brother come in and terrorize them. And so we've created a scenario that rather than people being able to get the help that they need or feel comfortable in saying, I'm experiencing these emotions that are uncomfortable and are destabilizing me, they don't feel safe in being able to even approach that. And so we have all the government interventions in these issues have made it so much worse than what we have already, what we had already established before government became involved. And so the response that we've seen this last year increased mental health issues. It increased, I call them social isolation deaths. It increased substance abuse issues. And so it really created a problem where we had people that had been had regained their mental health and had been stable for a decade or two. And now from the government reaction of this last year have found that they've fallen back into relapsing into these terrible circumstances. And if they go and try to get help, then they're putting themselves in a scenario where they have a fear of the government reaction to them getting help. And so we
Right.
really need our, our bureaucrats at the federal level to reevaluate what they've done to our communities, because they've taken a bad situation and made it worse, and now basically weaponized it against the community and those that are responsible gun owners and want to have the ability to practice self-defense.
Right. Now, I don't know if you can see the comment I just posted. This is from Terry in the chat room. She says, parents that own guns should also teach their children proper gun safety. That way they grow up knowing how to safely handle them. And I can't agree more with that. My son was, I think he was 12, 13, and we took him to the range. I've taught him how to disassemble his gun, clean his guns, safe firearms. And last year, he actually shot a 3-gun match with me, him and I together. And I couldn't be more proud that my teaching of the safety aspect came through like it should. Because we don't teach, we teach people, or we teach kids to be afraid as opposed to be knowledgeable. And that's one of the things that we used to do. We used to teach riflery in school. When I was in college, I took riflery as an elective. When my mom was in school, it was commonplace to actually have riflery class as an elective in high school. We don't do that anymore. We don't teach. And that breeds fear or lack of knowledge. And that's how you end up with accidental shootings, accidental deaths for firearms. And it's one of those things that we really should, I think, overall put in. And I mean, I suggest to anybody I know, if you have firearms, teach your kids responsibility with those firearms, because they're not toys.
Correct.
You can look at them as toys. You can say they're toys. I know that, what did they come out with? The new one that was the Block 19 that looks like a Lego Glock. Yeah, that's just an accident waiting to happen right there.
Yeah.
That doesn't teach people firearm safety, firearm knowledge, and, the capability to use. I seriously think that we should be training children probably between the ages of 12 and 15. That would be a good age, I think, to start teaching them firearm safety. And we would have half, at least, I think, accidental discharges that impact children.
We probably decrease it even less than that.
Yeah. And the other side is getting parents to actually be more responsible. I mean, how many times have you seen the stories on on TV or whatnot where somebody got into his mom's purse, a little kid got into his mom's purse and got the firearm and ended up shooting his mom through the purse, not because he understood it, just because he's playing with it.
Right.
Yeah, firearms, yes, they can be dangerous if you do not have the knowledge and skill to use them. So get the knowledge and skill, you take away the dangerousness of the firearm. That's my opinion. I know that's weird for a liberal, but that is. I don't care.
Well, I mean, the antidote is always education. And so when we are actually driving fear to education, that is where dangerous and bad things happen. And so I think that this is where our media and our government bureaucrats have been highly irresponsible when it comes to this particular subject, because rather than taking the opportunity to educate, they take the opportunity to simply create fear and even create fear from education. And so I would highly encourage people to understand that you're an American and understand that this is a freedom that has been given to us for a very important reason. And there are so many sources of education out there, education that you can have even on YouTube. There's so many responsible sites of gun owners that are educators in this arena that you can really learn about how all of these things work without even ever having to touch a gun. But you can at least have the proper education to understand what it is that we're talking about and the scenario that we're facing. And, I'm very active on Twitter, and a lot of the, I don't even consider them liberals. I consider them the radical left. It's interesting because they want to defund our police. They want to eliminate jails and prisons, but they also want to disarm us. And they also want people that are violent to not be held accountable for their violence. And so my question is then, what scenario are you creating for our community? we cannot have a scenario where violence is being celebrated. There's no accountability for violence happening. And then we're also not able to defend and protect our families. I don't even understand how that could be considered a utopia ideology, but there are many that are influential in our government that have those opinions. And so the best way that we can, the antidote to all of this is education, self-education, reaching out, finding those sources that can give you the advice and guidance with experience and sound knowledge and training. And if you go to any of our gun ranges, all of them have very professional, experienced people that can help you and teach you the ins and outs of how to use a gun, of gun safety, and making sure that you're able to protect your family, even if you're not a gun owner, just so that you can be aware and have situational awareness.
Right. And there's a lot of places, these gun ranges and stuff like that will rent you a gun if you don't own one. And they will tutor you. They will show you how to use it. They will kind of guide you. One of the cool things about Rio Salado, when my son was shooting with me, him and his girlfriend, neither one of them had ever been in competition, but they had mentors. And the mentors stayed with our squad and helped them.
That's
okay,
awesome.
This is what you have to do. This is how you learn. This is how you
right.
Okay, you got to do this. It's an education and passing that information from one person to another in a way that we all learn and we all gain. And I'm a big fan of that because I've seen, because where we work, we have a lot of hazardous chemicals, and I've seen people without training that have caused incidents where if they were trained, they wouldn't have. And it's the same with gun ownership. You have an incident with a gun if you don't have the training for it.
Right.
It's one of the things they talked about in the class yesterday. He's like, the teacher was like, okay, who has a plan for if there's somebody that breaks into your house? And I'm like, well, I do.
Yeah.
Because we've gone through this scenario. We both have shotguns available because that in our cookie cutter neighborhood is better than having, 9mm or 45 that could punch through and go to the next door neighbor's house.
Right.
But having a plan, having knowledge, having experience, and knowing what to do ahead of time is key to protecting yourself. And so I urge people, get training, figure out look at your yard, your house. Where are your soft points? When you go to work, okay, do you scan the parking lot when you get out of your car if it's dark outside and you can't see anything? Do you pay attention to what could possibly be going on around your work? Because we work in a kind of a not so great area of Phoenix. So I'm constantly looking at the property as, okay, where could a potential threat come from? It's not paranoia. It's just common sense, honestly.
To be fair, when I worked at the Phoenix City Council from 2018 to 2019, I had to work many late nights oftentimes because the city council is notorious for dropping a new agenda item or remarkably changing an agenda item that takes a lot of research for me to be able to prepare the councilman the next day before his meeting. And so I'd have many late nights where I'd be leaving at 8 or 9 p.m. from the office, and it's in downtown Phoenix, and there would be a lot of people with mental health disturbances experiencing them in real time. And there was one night that I had left the office and the parking lot is diagonal. It's like down the street and across on the other corner. Mm-hmm. And you have to go up through an elevator that is a very old elevator. It takes a very long time for it to operate. And then there's stairs right next to the elevator that are outside. And so there was someone that was in an emotional mental health crisis that was halfway up the first set of stairs. So he had enough time to be able to charge at me while I was waiting for the elevator. And he also had enough time to grab me or to hurt me. And so I had to run around the corner because you're not allowed to carry a weapon into the building. So here I am. I'm a survivor of domestic violence. I'm well trained. I have my firearm in my car, which he is in between me being able to access that. And he is on the stairwell charging at me every time I go to try to get up to the elevator. And so I don't have the ability to go too far away from him because he, again, keeps charging and then coming back and charging. So I don't want him to get into a chase where he chases me around the building and now I'm out of sight of cameras and everyone else. I'm not able to get to my car. I'm not able to access the stairwell, and I'm not able to run back because there's also a security badge to be able to get in, and there's a delay to that, and I wouldn't be able to get back into the building safely in time either. And so that was a moment where it was so surreal to me as to what situation we've created. So I'm having to just basically cower behind the building, wait for the police to show up when I have the training and the ability to de-escalate this man, but I am not, only because of government restrictions. I have all the qualifications to handle this. And that's the testimony I gave when there was another law that came up, but I don't think it passed, which was the ability to be able to carry in these scenarios and not have your rights restricted in government buildings. And so if you are not trained for that scenario, I don't know what my response would have been if I had no training, because I don't know if I would have realized that I can't get to the elevator, or I can't get back to the building, or if I run around the corner, now there's no visibility to me and I'm less safe to where I'm at. And
I think that was an article that I looked up. It was in the Arizona azcentral.com, specifically talking because you were working for Councilman DeCiccio at the time. Mm-hmm. And I saw that article and I was like, wow, I mean, that's a tough situation to have to deal with just because of the fact that they fear a person carrying a firearm in the city building. And it's just like, okay, well, you can't have it both. You know, you put your people at risk when you're working late at night. Because one of the things that I've noticed, especially going to and from work, because we work about a mile from the Capitol, is that every day when we go to work, we see a lot of homeless people and a lot of people that have the symptoms by watching them of some sort of mental illness or mental disturbance, and not being able to protect yourself because of government.
Right.
And government, or I should say the Constitution specifically says you have the right to defend yourself, whereas government's telling you, no, you can't do that in our building.
Right. And, the only answer they had for me was that, well, you can call our security to have them come escort you. They're not always available. Oftentimes they only had one person on security and they had to secure the building.
And how long does that take?
Right.
How long does it take for them to show up?
Right. And so it was a very frustrating situation because the issue never got addressed. There's also someone I advocated for about a year later because she was in a domestic violence situation. She worked at the airport and her abuser was someone else that worked at the airport for a different airline. And they left the city of Phoenix airport has the schedule of everyone public on all the machines that all of the workers can access. So her abuser had full access to know where she was at all the time. And they would not do anything to stop it. They wouldn't do anything to stop him. She took it to court. The judge said that because he was a refugee immigrant, that he didn't want to do anything beyond saying he couldn't get within 5 feet of her because it would put his immigration status at risk. And so here's a man that's actively threatening her, showing up at her house in the middle of the night, attempting to rape her multiple times. And one of the nights that he went and tried to rape her, she fled to a hotel. She, at this point, did have a firearm. When she went to work the next day, she forgot to take the firearm out of her bag going into work and went through the security. And so then City of Phoenix tried to fire her from her job for by accident carrying the gun into through airport security when she had just been attempted to be murdered and raped by her coworker who she was going to be seeing in a few minutes the next day.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. It literally doesn't. I mean, I understand that we have to have laws, but laws are blind, honestly. And it's the situation that needs to be dealt with as opposed to specific laws. For me, I mean, that would have been, if, for example, if, Mrs. Scooter was going to work and she had a gun with her, if I'm not there, I'm more than happy to have her have that firearm just because it protects her and she knows how to use it. But in the situation where, okay, so they search cars and stuff like that, which they can't do legally in Arizona based on ARS 12, I can't remember the number now. I have it printed out because I carry it in my car. That way, if my car is searched at work and they find a firearm, I have my Arizona revised statute that says this is legal, because I don't want to lose my job. But that's the thing. Okay, which is more important, enforcing something or keeping somebody from being killed,
right,
or maimed or whatnot? It's a tough situation. She did the right thing. I mean, yeah, okay, she made a mistake by carrying her gun back to work, but what other options should she have when she has an actual imminent threat to her person?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and she was in a situation where she was being cornered frequently, all of the time. They wouldn't provide her with security. They refused to do anything to protect her schedule. And so it's a terrible, my big frustration when it comes to gun rights and the Second Amendment, is the scenario that we are constantly putting survivors of domestic violence and those that face an active threat against them. Because we are making it more difficult for women to be able to be protected in these scenarios. And the only thing that the only practical weapon that's going to give you an equal footing against a male attacker is going to be a firearm. I received training on every other type of weapon because I was so afraid of guns. And what it came down to is that a firearm was going to be the only thing that gave me even a fighting chance.
Well, I mean, that's why Wyatt Earp called it the great equalizer. Mm-hmm. There's a reason for that. And you know, like for my wife, I want her to carry a firearm. I want her to protect herself because she's small. Yeah. She's like, 4'2". Okay, 5.0. She's flipping me off right now. But she's small. So competing against somebody that's my size or bigger, the firearm is the equalizer. It protects her. And we need to look at that from a standpoint nationally, I think, and get past these stupid legislations they're trying to throw in right now. I know that the big ones that have passed the House that are stopped at the Senate, which is nice. But I think that people need to understand, especially the anti-gunners or the people that are against, the common sense gun laws. Let's do that. They need to understand that that is irrelevant when you're in a situation where you have to defend your life. You don't care at that point as long as you stay alive.
Well, and I mean, when you look at even the basic things, I mean, the most common one is a waiting period to be able to get a firearm. Okay, when let's say that it's Saturday, I have an altercation with my spouse. Now I realize I'm in a domestic violence relationship, and now I have to have a 3-day waiting period before I'm able to get anything to defend myself. Or I go and I have to file an order of protection, but I'm still not able to access a firearm for 3 days to be able to protect myself when all you gave me was a piece of paper that's going to upset the person that I'm giving the piece of paper to. Right. And so these laws they do not make sense, and they empower violent people. Even when you look at the red flag law allows my former abuser to declare me as unstable, and it eliminates my due process of rather than the government having to prove that before they eliminate my rights, they leave me as a sitting duck for 30 to 90 days. And now my abuser has the ability to come and access my property, my house, or corner me in a scenario where I'm not even at home, and where I'm completely disarmed and able to protect myself. There has not been a single common sense gun reform that I have found that does not put a domestic violence survivor in a worse situation than if that law didn't exist. And so, and when you look at most of these laws, especially the ones that regulate firearms, their goal is to eliminate 90% of firearms, if not 100%. And so even my basic shotguns would be identified as an assault rifle, even though it's just a basic 22.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I've got an assault rifle that's a 22 caliber. It's just like, really? Do you guys even know the difference? And that's the thing is you can see a 223 bolt action that's not an assault rifle and a 223 AR that is an assault rifle, not because there's any difference other than one's manually loaded and one's semi-auto. Other than that, they're the same damn weapon. So yeah, it's just, I have a hard time with Feinstein's bill that she tried to throw through about assault rifles, because she obviously doesn't know what the hell she's talking about when it comes to actually firearms. So
we have Rebecca Rios, Senator Rebecca Rios in Arizona, that's consistently trying to ban extra capacity magazines. I don't even think she understands what that means, because most of the extra capacity magazines are actually just to make it more comfortable for your hand. And so my extra capacity magazine just gives me an extra couple of magazines, but really the purpose of it is so there's a place for my pinky, which makes the gun safer to use. And so it's not the extra capacity magazine. Yes, it's a benefit to self-defense to be able to have additional magazines, especially if you're facing a situation where multiple people are entering your home illegally. You need to have at least 5 rounds per person attacking you. So you need to have an extra capacity magazine for that reason. But the most important reason is that I can use that firearm more safely because it gives my pinky more stability. And it is ludicrous to me that you have a senator saying that my pinky shouldn't be able to have a place to rest to safely utilize my firearm.
Right. Kara has the same problem because she's got extended magazines because of the pinky, specifically because of the pinky thing, right?
Yeah.
That her 45 has an extension, doesn't hold more rounds. It holds one more round, but it has the pinky extension to make it solid.
Right.
But that's why we have a 20 round magazine as opposed to a 4+1. You know, it works, right? But yeah, that's the thing is it honestly, when you look at it in the 3 years that I've been competing, 2 years, 3 years, I can say that I can take a 10 round magazine in my firearm and I can swap that so fast that I might as well have a 30 round magazine. And a lot of people that are actually trained can swap magazines so fast. It doesn't matter how many rounds you have in the magazine. It matters how many times you can change the magazine and activate the firearm. There's a total difference there. And a lot of non-knowledgeable people in the gun community or outside the gun community don't understand that.
Right.
And that's one of the things about training. I mean, 3 years ago when I first started, it took me a while to figure out how to switch magazines and on the run, this, that, and the other. Now it's muscle memory. So I can easily swap magazines on the run and be able to fire a shit ton of rounds. But it's this person here and this person here that dictates how those rounds go. And I would never actually fire at somebody unless I had absolutely no choice. Right. And they don't think about that when they're making these laws, because it's not the legal gun owner that's going to ignore the law. It's the criminals. And they're already ignoring the law. They're already getting illegal guns. So any common sense gun law is completely oblivious to them.
Correct. It is every single one of these laws. I've never found one that, like I said, I cannot reiterate that enough. I've never found one that does not make me less safe versus the person trying to attack me. And so even when I see the things of the media trying to make it seem like this person was trying to shoot 500 people because they had 500 rounds on them. Well, in my first training I went to, I was told, be prepared that I'm going to have to practice with 500 rounds to the point to be super proficient in being able to use my firearm safely. And so they told us, get 1,000 rounds when you're getting started to practice, to attend all of your classes so that you have enough rounds to the point that you can become at a minimum level of proficient. And so it's so aggravating because all of the information, all the things that are needed to be a responsible gun owner have so much misinformation around them as to the fact that this is really what you should be doing as a responsible gun owner to learn. And this is how you effectively need to be responsible to protect yourself and others and make sure you are using your gun safely. And oh, by the way, we should be encouraging that. We should be encouraging that responsibility, not fear mongering so that people don't get educated.
Right. And that's the thing. You use fear to make people panic as opposed to educate. And that's really, really a downside to it all.
Yeah.
So, all right. We've actually gone over our hour, but that's okay because it's very important information. I really enjoyed having you on the show. I hope I can get you on the show again in the future so we can talk about more cool stuff like this.
Absolutely.
Because, I mean, when it comes down to it, liberal, conservative, we all want to live. And the only way to stay alive is to actually prepare ourselves for having to defend ourselves in some form. So I really appreciate you being on the show. You're my first guest. That's awesome.
Well, thanks so much for having me on. And I would encourage people go to easyaz.org and sign up for our action steps, because once the legislative session starts, if there's any bills that come up that are anti-Second Amendment or pro-Second Amendment, we'll keep you informed of where they're at. And if we need you to help take action to get either the bill killed or over the edge, we make it very easy. All of our action steps are a minute or less. And again, that's easyaz.org.
And I was looking at that. And one of the things that I really, really like about this is they teach you how to use Request to Speak and Bill Tracker, which are Arizona. Everybody in Arizona can do this. So you can actually look at different bills, different legislation that's going through, and actually react and comment on and or actually be in the actual conversation when it goes into committee. So go to easyaz.org, sign up and everything, get updates and stuff like that, be a part of our government as opposed to sitting aside, because we can't make changes if we don't interact. And this is a good way to do that.
Actually go down to the legislature and get you your username and password for you, and then send it to you with instructions on how to change your password. So we make it very, very easy to participate and keep you informed.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I don't like about the fact that you have to actually go log in at the Capitol to be able to use Request to Speak and Bill Tracker. So this is a good option, is they will do that for you. There's other organizations that'll do that too, but Bill Tracker and Request to Speak, big things. So go to easyaz.org and sign up. They'll help you out. It'll make a big difference.
Absolutely. We got to protect our state.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for listening in the show today. Hope to see you again next week, and have a good week. Be safe out there. Get some training, get some knowledge. You'll be good.
Thanks so much.